Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final panel discussion of TechBBQ.
Where are we sitting?
We're the final act. I don't know if that's an insult or if it's positive. We are going to discuss the future now, so that when you leave TechBBQ, you actually leave with also some go-to things about what's.
That's my family right there.
My name is Barbara. I work as a manager at KPMG, and I'm the co-founder of Women in AI Denmark. With me today, I have an amazing panel. I have Anders, Jim, and Daria. And I think if you can just give a quick introduction to yourself. Will you start, Daria?
Sure. So my name is Daria. Krivonos, I head up the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies, which is a very I'm not going to say old, but very seasoned think tank. We're 54 years old, and we've been working with the future across multiple disciplines for more than 5 decades. That's kind of what we do.
My name is Jim. I'm a serial entrepreneur, technology geek, and sci-fi writer, armchair futurist. And this is going to be a fascinating conversation.
I'm Anders. Besides being a father of 4 beautiful children, then I've been in the tech ecosystem here in the Nordics for the past 10 or 12 years or something like that, being very fortunate to be part of some fantastic journeys.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. So we're speaking about what future skills we're going to need. I'm sure that now that OpenAI made ChatGPT and whatnot available, for the public, maybe some of you had at least some thoughts about what that meant for your jobs. But before we get started, Daria, will you give a quick introduction to what kind of tech trends or trends in general we are seeing now in the future that might affect the skills we need?
Well, I think the first trend is pretty obvious because we're all feeling that things are accelerating, things are moving faster and faster. In many ways, they are. So we're seeing almost a collapse of generations because the way we experience the world and the pace at which it changes is actually no longer 20 years, but far less. So there is an acceleration. That's I guess, the one trend. The other one is also that we're grappling. We have a little bit of a change fatigue at a time where we should use it as an opportunity. So we feel that I guess that uncertainty is a bug rather than a feature, but it could be a feature if we put our mind to it. And then, of course, there are the obvious tech trends. I will actually maybe let the gentleman say a little bit more about that because you work in tech, but that we're seeing a new technologies, Industrial Revolution 4.0, which is very different from the previous 3. And I think that it's impacting a different group of people globally, but also a different part of the globe disproportionately. So I think we're seeing a little bit of tensions, but also it's a bit of some sort of ice has been broken, and now we get to put the flavor on the slush ice. So,
a lot of change is happening. Anders, what does that mean for the skills that we as individual needs to have in the future to be competitive?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think I want to start a little bit before that and say that I think thinking through my own life and thinking about where I really think that things move the needle, whether this being with my wife or my children or my friends or all my coworkers and everyone in my surroundings. I think where it really moves the needle is about communication. And I think with good communication leads good collaboration. And I think on the other side, when we see situations where it doesn't work, we see that it gets sidetracked, it goes sideways. Leading to less productivity. We see that there will be high employee turnover, and generally people, they are less happy. So I think when it comes to improving skills in the future, I think we need to really focus on the human skills.
I would add to that the education is actually important for those that are left behind. So there are certain skill sets that are repetitive and that it's an easy decision, not necessarily the right decision, but it's an easy decision for the corporation to say, for the bottom line, we get more efficiency in this particular situation. An example might be a warehouse, a dark warehouse, where you don't pay for lights or any of the things that are necessary because technology and the convergence of technology, that's the real factor. If it was one single technology that was just AI, that's a little bit of a change. But we have got everything from drones to longer battery life to AI to robotics. All of these things are converging at once. And what they are is our ability to, or our desire to kind of replicate what we are, right? Sensors and motors and activities and now thinking. That's where we're going to actually have to find that balance, I believe. And as we move forward, those repetitive skills are going to be like the easy ones, but there's going to be a lot of harder decisions that are coming.
Can I also think, we didn't discuss it before, but it just, as you were talking, the both of you, it just struck me that perhaps we're going to have to, so we advocate the future's literacy is a skill that is extremely relevant right now because we need to relate to the future faster than we used to. And what I mean by that is any technology deployed previously was more linear, in a sense. So it was linear in its development, it was linear in its deployment, it was linear in its, I guess, the way it would travel through society. Now we suddenly have exponential technologies, and it's not only software, etc. It's also, say, CRISPR. I mean, if we do something like CRISPR and gene editing, if you do it at germ level, it's suddenly exponential. We lose control. So I think for the first time, maybe in the history of our inventions, we're going to have to consider the consequences while we're developing them because it's going to be too late after deployment. And I think that's something that is very new, which means an ethical dialogue and the skills of implementing ethics in the development process is something that we're going to have to.
And how do we do that?
Well, I think the first thing you do is maybe realize that it's necessary, because realize that this industrial revolution is going to be different from the others. We will not have time to think about it afterwards. Then I guess we also discussed before walking up on the stage that we're going to have to, I'm sorry to say, we're going to have regulation. Because in our nature, we're curious, we want to get things out there, we want to move fast. And I think as we move fast, we break things. But this time, we're not just going to break things, we're going to change them forever. So I think with a little bit of help of public awareness, a little bit of help from the regulators, but a lot of ethical considerations and a lot of social responsibility with those who develop things, because it's exponential for the first time, maybe in our industrial history.
I would add to that I think that there's, especially when you look at the different skill sets that are there and the volumes of the population that fill into those skill sets, labor is absolutely a piece that's there. I mentioned before I write sci-fi, and one of the contentions is between man and machine. And I think that we need to put some sort of a guideline in place to, one, let them know we have our hands on the wheel, and say there's got to be a minimum ratio of man to machine, man to augmented intelligence, because artificial is not the value proposition, it's about augmenting us, that can exist in the workplace. If we do not do that, and we start displacing people en masse, then we have other challenges that humanity often deals with through the millennia that's going to come back on us. And I think that the ethical move, the responsible move, is to lead everything with empathy and be able to put yourself in the shoes of the different people that are affected and recognize that it's more than about the technology. It's about the humanity.
I would like to chip in. I think this almost becomes political, right? And I think that I'm probably a little bit more pragmatic. This is probably also because I've been building tech, and this is like the space I've been in now for a certain amount of years. And when I've been building tech, there's always been like, we have a problem and we see an opportunity, and now we need to try to solve this problem and using technology to do it. So I think for me, I'm even more thinking about like, this is something that needs to be built brick by brick. So we can do a lot of political stuff, but sitting here today with all this beautiful scale-up and startup people and tech people, I think we are the ones that makes the change. So I do think that with all the great solutions that I've seen here, I think that it starts here. It doesn't start on the political scene.
Absolutely right. I absolutely agree with that. And that's a wonderful kind of cross-section of technology that we have here today, kind of represent that. The ability to actually bring the people together and to think in a unified way is the essence to moving forward.
We've seen some new skills come with technological development, such as a prompt engineer, being good at prompting, skills like that. Can you mention some other new skills that you think we might see in the future? And what skills will we not see anymore?
I would say that prompting was a first phase. And I would say that Certain technologies are trying to move beyond it. One of the biggest challenges with adoption of technology is change and change of behavior. Prompting is not a natural way for people to actually have a conversation because it's not a natural flow. You have companies that started with ChatGPT, now you've got Pi.ai. Pi.ai leads with empathy. If you've played with it, you realize that doesn't work as well as you would hope it would. And I think that the skills that we need to have as a human, especially the people in this room, is to recognize that we need to make this as friction-free as possible. That makes it so it's approachable, that makes it so it moves forward. So prompting is the beginning of a new way to talk to machines, but we are just at the beginning. There's a lot more to go.
I think it's really interesting because when we look at how technology and people, they have to work together, like how do we apply technology, this is what kind of interests me. I was talking to different people and culture leads. I've been talking to them because we will soon be launching our MVP. So through this, I've been talking to people and culture leads in large corporates and in bigger scale-ups. And they all have great initiatives around like how do we upskill people. And we know that around 70-80% of everything that's being taught right now is about interpersonal, is about communication, collaboration, because they know this is important. But when we look at it, they don't really have a plan on how to apply it. So they are doing like huge efforts to try to make playbooks and a lot of other stuff using best practices. But what are they actually and how are they actually going to use technology to ensure that this is actually something that will be done and embedded into everyday life of the employees?
Well, one of the challenges of humanity is we tend to build the plane while we're flying it. And we're flying faster than ever, to your point, Daria. And we just need to recognize that. And that's why it's important for collaboration as well, is we need to be able to not only be able to fly the plane while we're building it as we do, but we need to be able to fix the plane, and we need to be able to respond to the plane in as rapid fashion as possible because we are accelerating.
Yeah, I think, and this is maybe because we advocate it, but I think mental flexibility may be one of the key traits that we're going to need in the future because we are. I mean, how many times have we all sat in decision-making processes or with very senior stakeholders in large corporations and they say, I have a gut feeling, and a gut feeling can sometimes just be a stomach flu based on history and could be the poorest condition to make a decision about the future. So I think mental flexibility is probably one of the key skills we're going to need to develop. And by that I mean also, when you see change, our gut reaction is usually to think it's bad for business. And a lot of businesses have come out of things changing, but those who are incumbents, those who are present, would usually think the change is bad for business. Then they would respond with a game plan that used to work before in conditions that are completely different from previous situations, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think mental flexibility, and then we're going to touch on education also, but I think it's not even going to be about education, it's like life vocation. We're going to have, somehow it's going to be a fluid process of upskilling because we update our apps. We upgrade our machinery and manufacturing, but with humans, you almost have to ask permission to go on a course still at a time where we discuss reskilling and upskilling as a natural thing, right? So I think mental flexibility.
Can I ask you something? Just so when we're looking at psychometrics and when we're looking at personality traits, I know about adaptability and creativity and empathy. What does that actually mean, the mental flexibility? What is that? Is that a trait or what?
It is a trait, and I think I guess it's very closely, I would say it's probably very closely linked to creativity. It's about exploring without fear, and it's exploring with curiosity. So I guess mental flexibility is an adult word for curiosity and trying to somehow harness excitement about change rather than respond with fear, or at least be aware of it. So I guess it's an adult word for curiosity and exploration.
Yeah, nice.
It's good.
What can companies do concretely to make their workforce ready for this future? Anders?
I think again, key here is that technology, with all the knowledge we have, with all the best practice that's being made, with all the data points we have on peoples and personas, this is more about how is this being actually applied into people's everyday lives. I think that this is not rocket science. We all know that learning by doing is one of the best ways of learning. And I think when you're looking at training today, then it's super divorced from reality. This goes whether it's a classroom setting or whether it's a coaching session, you learn something about yourself or some other people, and you learn about situation and how to act, but it's not happening right now. So you need to cope with that. You need to remember it in probably a stressful situation at some point. So I think in order for people and us and humanity actually to adapt to these changes and basically develop personally, it needs to be embedded into their everyday lives. And I think we have a very good option of doing that with technology.
Absolutely. We actually spoke backstage about this just a little bit. It's about raising awareness. And we specifically talked about the different initiatives that are brand new on the landscape. And thinking about these as kernels of ideas, we have diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG. They're not necessarily taking off the best they can. However, they're the start. This ability to actually get corporations to balance the bottom line with the humanity is, I think, extremely important. I saw a conversation, a fireside chat yesterday with one of the co-founders of Landfolk, which she really stressed that importance of the downtime, of the reset. And I think that if we can bring that into a narrative with the corporations to recognize that can actually increase your efficiency. We thought that the COVID was actually really bad. I don't want to go on record to say anything other than that, but it helped us to evolve and adapt as we did. And we learned that you didn't actually have to have asses in seats to be productive in a office space. We were just as productive or more productive in some cases when we were actually remote and in our own homes, in our own comfort, in our own pajamas, with our own coffee. And I think that's an important thing that we can imbue and bring forth into these corporate environments. And it's important that we do these things.
I think that, again, I think it's a little bit more pragmatic from my side because I didn't understand everything you said, sorry. But I think that if I look at it, then I have been selling to large corporates, enterprise businesses, and scale-ups for many, many years now, and building different sales frameworks and models, etc. And it's all about understanding these personas, right? So we know that if they need to adapt to the changes, there needs to be something in it for them. So I think that everything, or something that all businesses, they do understand, is employee turnover, for instance, right? They know that it's extremely harmful. They understand productivity, right? So I think that this is more about like technology also really like evolving and understand that we need to prove what we are saying. We need to walk the talk. So we can make a lot of promises, but how do we actually prove that it works? And I think that makes it much easier on C-level and for the ones that are actually making the decisions to do something about it.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you, and yet, I mean, trying to tie it together, maybe, I think I also agree with you that, you know, we're going to have to, I mean, companies are going to have to do this because it's better for, you know, the long term, etc. But all they care about is, they don't actually even care about churn. It's only because it impacts bottom line.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Exactly.
I mean, it's...
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And if we're looking at what happened to blue-collar work, what happened to manufacturing, I mean, no one brought in thousands of people to just do something else at the factory. They just didn't. They were gone for good. Mm-hmm. If we're looking at the US, what's happening to mental health, you know, the certain bracket of the male population, technology displaces labor, at least historically. And I would love to think that this time is different. I yet to hear why. So unless we either find a different way of measuring triple bottom line, quadruple bottom line, whatever it is, I think there's going to have to be a push from society, because many corporates want to do this, but they want it to be a level playing field. I think in the Nordics we discussed that we have a long tradition of giving back and of investing back in society, social responsibility as a good thing. But again, you're one financial crisis away from them also thinking bottom line. You're one competitive advantage away from them having to walk away from this at least for a while, and we'll do it later. And so I would love to think that everybody's going to invest in the reskilling, upskilling, and the human factor matters, and we can sit in our pajamas and it's still productive. But experience just shows that if profit is the main driver, if that's how we measure success, if GDP is how we measure country success, and mind you, an oil spill is GDP positive, right? If we spill the oil, it's going to be positive for GDP because we need a cleanup. So we have so many metrics in place that drive behavior for corporates, for regulators, for countries, that are not driving what we're hoping to see happen. So this is not to get political, but we want to do the right things, but we're measured on the wrong ones.
Exactly right.
I hate
Well
to
said.
be the party
said.
pooper.
We need to touch upon education before we move on to some of these lovely questions from the audience. So things are moving fast. We need new skills. Organizations are changing. Way of work is changing. Human-machine collaboration, whatnot. What does a university degree look like in the future that you can actually use for something?
It's obsolete. That would be one word.
You want to make a guess?
I'm going to raise my hand and say I did not go to university. I was a nuclear engineer in the military. So I will take a different approach on this and say that university was formed a certain way and the education process was formed a certain way. And it was about how you could access information, how you could access growth, right? You could evolve and you could do this in an environment that was comfortable. Information is everywhere. The ability for people to get to the information is an opportunity, but at the same time, because it's everywhere, where do you start? So I think that the first thing that needs to happen if we're going to educate people to the next thing is to recognize that the actual act of teaching has to evolve as well. And when we do that, we need tools. And the tools that we're talking about that are displacing jobs are the same tools used in different ways that can actually be focused towards helping us become more, learning more. Sunny Vu was on the stage over in the fourth stage earlier today, and he's constantly learning. He's talking about constantly learning. Not everybody's as motivated as Sunny, but reducing the friction, making it easier to access, and giving some sort of a guidepost and some sort of a system, I think, is essential before we learn about the skills.
I totally echo that, and I have a confession as well. I did not go to university either. I barely made it through business school. But yeah.
There we go.
But I think that if we go even a few steps before that, I think that I was not fond of school. I couldn't wait for everything that happened between the lessons. That was what interested me, and I can now see my son. He's 10 years old. He actually is his birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much. So during COVID lockdown, I think a lot of us parents, we experienced our kids being taught homeschooling, or at least they were doing it on Zoom. And at the same time, there was running a program on Danish national TV where we had these dudes from a kids show also doing some educational stuff. And I saw my kid actually, he was dancing, he was happy, and everything was good when he was watching these guys, and he was telling about it when there was dinner, and he learned so much. And then he went into the Zoom meeting with his class. And then it was just like, he totally switched off. And he was exactly, unfortunately, he was exactly like me. So I think there's something about this adaptive learning that we all know is quite important. But I think if this doesn't change, then it doesn't matter what we are trying to teach people. If we don't know how people they like to be taught and what is their preferences, then it's difficult to tell them anything.
Well, what do we need to learn, Daria, in the future?
What we need to learn? Well, see, that's the good thing. I don't know. I do think it's a paradox still that we teach people for 5 years and then expect them to use it for 5 decades. We still do that. There's someone in the room with whom I went to university, and we had a professor. And this is in the 2000s. We had a professor who would still walk around, smell of cigar or pipe or whatever, and he'd use these transparent things he would throw up on the board at a time we actually did have proper projectors, etc. So, you know, you have a cohort of teachers who will always be a few generations behind technologically. So it's going to take a lot of creativity for them, teaching those who are far ahead of them in terms of technology. I read today, and I'm not a biologist, so this is probably in need of fact-checking, but that you make neural connections solid by the time you've done something 400 times, but if you do it through play, it only requires 20 times. I don't know if it's a biological fact, but there's something to it. Imagine if someone explained to your kid over Zoom, in theory, how to ride a bike. I mean, that would take quite a long time. They would probably lose interest, but the fact that when they get on the bike and they fall and they hurt themselves, they could go do it with friends. I mean, we learn faster when it's through play.
Exactly.
So I think, I'm not saying gamification, because gamification has gotten this digital flavor, but through play. And I think
we play.
That's how we learn, and that's, again, in a grown-up life, it's through doing something. And I also think, I mean, if you get a car, it devalues year after year. You already have professions, say doctors and auditors, who need to stay up to date in order to keep their licenses. I think we should do that with everything. I think every year you hit January 1st and you start counting down from 100. And you can keep that up by doing some courses through the year. So I think every year, when we hit a new year, we should start counting down from 100 in terms of skills, and you need to keep that up. And no matter, you can be anything. You can go meditate for a week, and you get some points. But I think minds have to be at least systematically kept up to date.
Jim, you mentioned ethics as one of the most important human skills. How do you learn that?
Empathy.
Empathy.
To understand how we need to be as human beings with technology, we need to, in my opinion, I wrote some articles in TechCrunch several years ago around personifying technology. And if we shift our perspective and start to personify a technology, it gets to be an interesting conversation about what the requirements of the technology, what it can and can't do. So if you were looking at technology where you bring into a corporation as an employee, then what are the requirements? It's got to be trustworthy. It's got to be able to do the job you hired it to do. And it's got to be responsible. You've got to be able to trust it. If the trust isn't there, you know it's not there from the very beginning. So as we design and as we build, the ethics of what it is to be human has got to be the minimum bar for what goes in.
Dasha?
I know that's not how we do it.
No, and I fully agree. My only concern is that we use ethics as a fig leaf when it comes to technology, sometimes. And what I mean by that is that ethics are a moving target that we somehow perceive it as universal. I mean, we had human beings in zoos last century. We're all the way up to the 1930s where we stopped having people in zoological gardens. Be it Asians or be it African population, we thought it was exciting as Europeans to watch them in zoos, and that was ethical. So ethics are a moving target. And if we don't want to go, time series, you can also go cross-section analysis. Ethics differ in different cultures. So ethics are extremely important, but how we're going to align that in a global population moving at different paces with 1 billion without electricity,
we
really have our work cut out for us.
We can start with the first 3 laws of robotics we've already violated. So
yeah, I fully agree with you. I'm just saying it has to be something taken very, very seriously because it is a moving target. Yeah. And it has to be a consciously moving target and not just because someone else invented it before us, we better keep up, screw ethics.
Exactly right. Care and feeding.
We are already running out of time. I knew when we spoke before this that we could talk forever, but let's take a few of these amazing questions from the audience. I'm going to take the top one that got the most votes. So it says, Jim, you say that we have to be as friction-free as possible in helping people embrace this rapid change. Do you have concrete advice on how to do this?
Create experiences that are natural, and it's like you're talking to your grandmother. Make it so that I don't have to learn a new language, that I don't have to change my behavior, and that it is part of my ambient world. It can't be in the foreground. It's in the foreground today. It's going to shift into the background, but it absolutely has to become ambient and a part of our environment. The same way that if we look at the evolution of how we actually power this building, or how we cool, well, not so this much building, how we cool environments, that is a thing that has gone from it's a noisy thing in the middle of the room to it's something that's running in the background to something that you just expect and becoming something so crucial to us. I think that as we engage with technology, it has to be that natural. It has to move in that direction.
Technology is outpacing legislation. Should lawmakers go agile, or should the full responsibility be on the ethics of practitioners?
Well, I think it's going to have to be both, because I mean, again, if it's already lacking and lagging, then and we've seen. I mean, again, I do believe that all humans have the best interest in mind, but we're already seeing what happens with ethical standards when you leave them only to those who are interested in progress. And there's also the notion that those who develop it may have had the best intentions, but it's always going to be picked up by somebody else and used for something else. So I think ethics resting with developers only, or those who would somehow distribute it, is just not enough, because you're always going to have someone out there who can use it for something else. So it's going to have to be both. Legislation is going to have to catch up.
I 100% agree. It's that knowledge that while you can have the best intentions, not everybody has the best intentions.
Yeah.
Humans have a habit of kind of trying to destroy ourselves. So we need to be able to actually have the guardrails and the safety measures in place to anticipate that.
Do you think our current brain is capable of learning and processing that huge amount of learning and data that is required to stay properly educated today?
Please translate that question for me. I simply didn't get it.
It's the
here.
third one down. Do you think the current brain
Yeah.
is capable?
But do you think that our current brain is actually capable of learning all the things you need to know in this new changing world?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that obviously the human brain evolves, but I think we are not able to. We ran a pretty awesome project where we looked at like just when people they are communicating. We all know that when people are communicating, we try to understand ourselves. We try to understand the person that we are talking to, like trying to get sense of our own personality and their personality. We try to cope with the relationship we have. We look at the context of the conversation. We look at the purpose. And then we ran just a small project. We just made a few use cases, and that gave more than 4 million outcomes. So are the human brain able to process that and doing that in the moment? No, obviously not. This is why we need technology to do it. So no, I definitely think so.
Any other comments on this?
I think
Nothing too scary.
I'm not a neurobiologist, so I'm fascinated by the human brain. I know we only use a small portion of it. We understand a slightly bigger portion of it, and I think it has a lot of potential. I agree. I think mental health maybe right now shows that we're not capable of processing that much change at once, that much information and input. I think the good news for me is that I read an article a while ago that said our ability to learn through life doesn't change. I know when you talk to older people, they go like, I'm too old for that. It's actually not true. So it seems like our ability to learn doesn't change with time, so there's no excuse to not continue doing that. But whether or not we're capable in the general capacity at any given moment, it seems like we're struggling.
That's good news, Daria.
Yeah, no excuse.
I think that actually the fragility of humankind is actually going to be a really interesting experiment. As we're advancing technology, technology is going to stick around through generations. We're not. We play a game of telephone as we record our history and pass that on generation to generation, and it gets diluted and changed, and technology will not. Technology will continue to learn and advance and exponentially, and we will continue to advance linearly simply because we are mortal. I think that's one of the challenges.
For now.
That's the book. There we go.
Do you think that with technology, we will also lose a part of our skills? So by that I mean, if you don't use creativity for a while, it's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it a little bit. Is that going to happen now that machines are doing everything for us?
What is your best friend's phone number?
I don't know.
Bingo.
Yeah. I think that says it all, right? We don't know how to find our way because we have Google Maps. We don't remember telephone numbers and so on anymore. Yeah. I really like, I think we have time for, we have 16 seconds, but maybe we can go a little bit over time. So do you think technology will free up more time for leisure? Or will we just work more? Or will we actually have more leisure?
I think it has to. I think that's one of the things that we have at least seen over the last decades is that people they want more leisure, and we can see it now with the younger generation that this is a demand. It's not something that we can fight against. People they want it, so I think people's priorities has changed, and I think when people want it, then obviously the technology will follow.
Last comment, Daria?
Yeah, I hate to do this again. No, but and I know I work with the future, but I can't help look back. I mean, the other day I heard a podcast that the hunters and gatherers only worked 15% of their time, and they actually had time for leisure and innovation. They also lived far shorter. And the other bit is, I actually did this back of the envelope the other day, so I no longer have to write a letter and go to the mailbox and get stamps, and I no longer do the dishes because I have a machine doing it. I have a Roomba vacuum cleaner. I've got so much technology that would free up at least 9 hours of my week, and there's not a single time where I go like, what am I supposed to do with this next hour? So I agree with you, it should, and it has to, but somehow counterintuitively, every technology we've implemented since then only has made us more stressed and work more. So I'm hoping, but history just shows something different.
Good point.
I think there's a wonderful quote that comes to mind here. I don't believe it. I'll rephrase it and say it's not about leisure, it's about the now. And I think that if you actually live in the past, you live with possible regret. If you actually live in the future, you live with anxiety and possibly fear. But when you live in the now, you're happy. And I think that's what it will bring us. We have the ability to arrive at that point, but we're going to have to go through some learnings to get there. But it's really about now, and we lose track of that as we're worried about what's next. And technology will help us lose some of that.
I think that's a great final quote. Live in the now.
Live in the now.
It's time for the after party. I know that's what you're all waiting for.
It's time for beer.
That is living in the
Asha,
now.
Jim, and Anders, a big hand. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.